Hello, everyone. It is great to virtually be here with you, and I really am kind of at the disadvantage here. You can see me, but I can't see you. So feel free to take notes as you may want to, as well as go ahead and certainly put questions in the Q&A box, because we want this to be as interactive as we can, even in this medium. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And this is always slideshow from beginning. Come on, there it is. Perfect. All righty, so we are here with our advanced executive body language for our virtual meetings. This is really a critical time for you as leaders in your organizations to take that leadership role. And it's been somewhat challenged, or some people have even told me they feel kind of compromised in this new world that we're in, because they feel like they're trying to maintain this boss status, their executive presence within this new virtual medium. And so I do have, even on this first screen, my emailing here, because if you get off before the conclusion of the webinar, I want to make sure that you go ahead and shoot me an email to my email address, allison@movingimageconsulting.com. If you send me that email and say, hey, I was on the webinar today, I want the materials afterward, then the sort of handouts, I have a Listening with Your Eyes workbook, which is really fun, and it has exercises in it that you can do with your team, even virtually, which is great. It's a way to help them with their observation skills so that they are better at their body language as well. So if you want any of those, make sure that you shoot me an email, because otherwise I don't have your contact information. So wanted to start with some numbers, because we know that soft skills are really critical for leadership. And there are, of course, these really blown out numbers, but then I really thought that this 85% of job success number felt really good to me. That so much comes from soft skills and people skills, and really by the time you get to this executive level, you have gained so many technical skills that people are looking to you really for more soft skills sometimes than your technical know-how, or you have the technical know-how in order to disseminate projects to the team. And you are the one that is supposed to be the visionary, the leader, the compassionate person within your teams. And one question that I have for you, if you can just put in the chat box rather than the Q&A box, is just put a little number in there as to how many people are typically on your virtual meetings. How large are the teams that we're dealing with? It won't necessarily influence so much the presentation today as it will probably the Q&A sessions. So if you can, just go ahead into the chat and just start putting in kind of how many people you generally have on these calls. If it's 3, if it's 10, if you're doing webinars across different facilities, as the financial executive, you may be leading webinars that are hundreds of people, and that is a different skill in and of itself. So one of the other really great things that I think is to start off with is really narrowing in on what are the skills that fall under this soft skills, or what is it that employers want to see from us. And so communication, we know that's what this is all about, right? How are we continuing to communicate in this new paradigm that we're in? Team player, that's something that's bandied about a lot, and that really comes from a lot of our collaboration signals that we will get into a little bit later. And then there's, of course, the compassion. You need to have empathy, you need to be sensitive, human. We have to create safe psychological spaces for everybody, and that's a little bit different in the virtual world. And how do we do that as executives? And Finally, Google themselves did a 3-year study, and they figured out or concluded for themselves that the high-performing teams really had these high social sensitivity that was characterized by trust, mutual respect, and the real connections that were being made. And that really, of course, lit me up because I'm like, woohoo, all right, body language is something that can improve all of these things. And for me, what we're going to be really concentrating on today are the signals that you are sending through the screen. We're not going to be so much talking about reading the signals of others, which would be a different training. And I believe the plan is to bring me back in live to do the presentation that we were originally going to do in May, which was going to be a live presentation, and we can certainly focus it a little bit more on reading others at that time. I just want to take a quick peek in the chat box just to see where you're at. Oh, people want the email again. Sure. Allison, so let me, actually, I have to come closer. I will put it in there. Allison at, I got to spell it correctly, movingimageconsulting.com. Yes, if any of you have consulting in your name, watch, because it's very easy to change it to consulting. I've done that before. Not so great. Okay, so wow, lots of you guys have lots on your team, so that's really good to know. 10 to 15 seems to be a little bit more of the average for you guys. Okay, that's really good for me to know. Okay, moving on. There we go. Oops, it's going backwards. There we go. Just a brief second or two on movement pattern analysis and what it is, because it's probably something you haven't heard before, since there are only 26 of us in the world who are certified in it. And it is a very scientifically based study of body language, particularly the nonverbal behavior that we exhibit as it connects to the decision-making process in the brain, which is why it is so applicable and so fantastic for leadership, because so much of what we do and so much of our team dynamics is based around decision-making. How we make decisions is actually seen in the body, and you can learn to read that in your teams. And also that's the way, of course, that I consult and coach individuals, is looking at, okay, these are the signals that I'm seeing. This is how you're going to be perceived by others based on the nonverbals that you exhibit. So one thing that we're not going to do today, and that you hopefully don't see any movement pattern analysts doing in the world, is looking at a picture like this, with the little blue guy has his arms crossed, and then the little red guy is here, and then the purple guy has his arms at his side. And we're not going to look at pictures, because our brain, our limbic brains, those reptilian part of our brain that takes care of our breathing and our heartbeat and all those sorts of things, it is reacting to the movement. It's not reacting to the picture. If we are reacting to somebody has their arms crossed, it is our brain saying, I have read and I have been told and learned that crossed arms means that person's closed off to me. Because the limbic brain is taking in everything in context, and the brain is saying, oh, well, it's really cold in here. Maybe she's just cold. Or our limbic brain is taking in the fact that I'm still leaning in and nodding, and I'm keeping really great eye contact. So there really is no other signal that I'm closed off to, except for the fact that I have my arms crossed. And so when I do training that we're either live, or we're looking at video, or we're doing something where it's the movement itself. And that's something just to know and to keep in mind. If you're interested in seeing the scientific studies that are out there, they are linked on my website, because it has been verified at Harvard, Brown, and some other really fancy universities. So we talked about that 85% number. I like to think about 70% or so of our communication is nonverbal. And I really believe that this is the next level of communication. This is where industry is going to be going because that is the next frontier of how we really get into leading our teams better and understanding how we are relating to one another. Most of our negative reactions to individuals is not based on their personality. It really is based on their decision making, because that's what underpins our personality. Somebody's called stubborn because their decision making process is not to give in. They stick really firm to something. They don't think they're stubborn, but they're given the negative title of being stubborn because of that decision-making style, which is underpinning our personality. If you've ever done other assessments like DISC and Myers-Briggs or any of those kinds of things, it's very similar. How are we relating to others based on ourselves first? So this is a picture of what normal Zoom meetings probably look like, and you've, I'm sure, been in a ton of these since we started this shelter-in-place new world that we're in. And so just this is where we're going to go from here. This is what they look like, and I'm here to make your next one better. Okay, because these people, they don't necessarily look engaged. They certainly don't look very pleasant or happy. There are so many things going on. We will return to this image later. But this is where most people's Zoom calls start, because we haven't been taught. We don't know what we should be doing. And so that's what I'm going to be sharing with you today. And number one is posture. All of these silhouettes here, I would actually say none of them are the best posture, honestly. There's problems with all of them. And what has happened with our computer meetings is they are really what I call great equalizers. Now, there is no hierarchy inherent in a virtual call. Everybody's little squares are the same size. You can't control where your square shows up in somebody's computer screen necessarily. So there isn't the normal hierarchy of a meeting. You can stand to give yourself more presence. You can, where you place yourself around the table, right, means something different. And so the best thing that you can do through the virtual screen to remain executive is to fix your posture. Because to be the boss, you need to look like the boss. And what, as we saw in that picture, most people, you can only see them from their faces or maybe their shoulder blades. But we need to be seeing more of you and increasing that posture. So everything we're going to talk about today, I adapted a live talk that I do that uses this word posture as our jumping off points to make it easy to remember. So we're modifying that for the virtual world. And for posture, you can still sit up straight. If you have one of those big, rolly executive chairs where it makes you lean way back like this, that's not so great for you leading the charge of being engaged. And I encourage everybody to sit up straight and to take up a little, I call it putting air in your pits, take up a little bit of space in your box, and then put space between your computer screen and how you're sitting so that people can see more of you. The Brady Bunch look is really difficult because then, my friends, all of your microfacial expressions are blown up really big in the screen. And what happens is any of those flashing moments of unhappiness, I hate to say the word disgust, but that's one of the ones that flashes most often across people's faces, because right before they remember that they're on screen and perk up, there's that momentary disagreement with what's being said. And because you're always on, somebody's always looking at you, potentially. And so you really, if you put some distance, they can't see that. Like, you can't necessarily see my facial expressions as well right now. But you can see more of my body language, which is giving off positive signals. And so you want to ask everybody to sit back a little bit, even if they're not as back as far as waist up, even if it's chest high. that is better than being so close to the screen. O stands for observation. And this is why I loved and I call my trainings listening with your eyes, because you need to also be looking at the signals that are being sent to you as you're going through your trainings. One thing to think about as an executive and as a manager of your teams is, how are your teams acting online, and how is that different from what you're used to seeing in the office with them? And this also means that they'd have to be live on the call. I very much am a proponent for making people show themselves on the screen. Doesn't mean they have to put makeup on and do their hair, but it does mean then they're really present. Because I know half of you, because I can't see you, are off doing other things. You're checking your email right now, you're doing all sorts of other things, and you're just listening, which is fine. This is a webinar, it's your choice, but if you want your team to be in the meeting and to really be present with you, they're going to have to be seen, because then you can tell when they're doing other things, or if they're constantly checking their phone or things like that because they're in the screen. It will just help keep that team, that collaboration going, because you're all in this together and we can see everybody. So observation, you're watching them just as much as they're watching you. It's still important to observe. That way you get a better idea of when something's wrong, or when you need to step in as an executive and say, hey, I noticed you were a little quiet on the meeting today, or you don't seem to be acting like yourself. Is there anything I can do? You can still have that empathy. You can still come across as caring and compassionate and noticing these things that are coming through the screen from your teams. Silence. This is a great one. Even because silence gets weird on video calls, right? Because they're like the phone. We don't like phone silence, but virtual silence seems to be even worse. And so I encourage individuals to, if they need to be silent for some reason, if they need to take a moment to think about something, if you're on the virtual call it out. Say, I need a moment to think about that. And that's telling everybody there's going to be some silence and it's okay. You don't have to fill in, right? And to keep your status, you can ask people to contribute by name, right? You can ask them or give them a list of kind of who's going to present in what order. Structure is really important. For this particular training for virtual meetings, the S could be turned into structure. Setting the meeting up with what's going to happen. Giving people time limits is also really great, because what will happen is, because people don't like silence, they may talk more than they normally would, because they're not seeing the nonverbal cues of, okay, we're ready for you to stop talking now. And they also don't see the cue when somebody else wants to come in and join the conversation, or make a comment. We get a lot of cues live. So when somebody takes a deep breath in, you know they're about to speak, and we don't necessarily see that if we're not aware to look for it. And just kind of putting out that, so who wants to begin? Awkward silence then, right? As everybody's trying to jockey for, okay, who's going to speak up first? Rather than having that happen on your meetings as the executive, again, that keeps you in your leadership status, because you're controlling the meeting and you're asking different people to talk at different times. This is our last one before we're going to take a break to live demo what it is that I'm talking about. So I can be bigger on your screen and not just a tiny thumbnail. But the triangle. There is something that is called the gesture triangle that I don't know that it exists in any other world but my world, but I call it the gesture triangle, because you should be gesturing from the waist as much as possible for like, know, trust, credibility. All of those really great things come across when we gesture from the waist. Problem with video calls is, in order to be seen, we tend to have to put our gestures up a little bit higher. And what happens is, as soon as we raise our gestures to our chest or shoulder area, this connects more closely to our emotions. And you may find that your meetings, like, why are they becoming more emotional? Why do people seem more invested in their points, or not giving things up, or becoming very passionate about what it is that they're talking about? Some of that is the nonverbal signals that are going to the brain. When you gesture from up here, we look at it as being more emphatic. It's more emotional because it's connecting to our emotional center and our core, and it's getting us all riled up in the middle of the meeting, which might not normally happen if we were sitting at a regular meeting and we were gesturing from down here. That's one of the reasons why I want you to sit back from the camera, so that you can gesture a little bit lower and you won't be as emotionally charged. And we want to see your gestures. We want to see everybody's gestures, because we tend to not believe or trust when we can't see hands. This goes way back to caveman days, when you would need to show your hands, or even anytime when people would carry weapons as a matter of course, you would show your hands that, hey, I'm not packing right now, or I don't have a weapon. Every time you come down with your hands low down here, or if all we see are little fingertips flitting into the screen, because if we only see from chest up, my fingers would be flitting in on your screen. And that becomes an issue, because then we don't really get the full picture. We don't really know what you're saying unless we have all of the nonverbal with it. So the more you can really encourage those people to sit back and see your expressions, it's really better. Particularly you as the executive, because what happens to us psychologically is we tend to go negative. This also goes back to that limbic brain and the caveman days when we were trying to survive. Our survival instinct is to expect the worst in order to be prepared for that. If we heard a noise outside our cave, something snapped in the woods, and you think, oh, somebody's out there. It could be a squirrel, it could be a bear, but you better prepare for the bear, right? As the person who was tapped to go see what it is outside, you would be taking a club with you or something in order to attack this bear that may be outside. We still have a little bit of that in our brains. So if we can't see your movement, and we start to be suspect, or we start to think, ooh, what's really happening? Are we in trouble? Are we going to be furloughed? Is everything okay? How many people are going, in this day and age, how many people are going to be furloughed? How many people are going to be fired? Is our branch going to go away? Right? All of these worries, if they can't see you and have the calm, reassuring nonverbals through the screen, the spiral in our brains goes to that negative, particularly in this time of worry and stress. We're going to be triggered more easily. So make sure to see your hands, okay? All right, now I want to go and stop, right? Demo time, yep, stop the share. So this is, I wanted to just pull it back so that you can see this a little bit bigger than the small thing. So first of all, I am scooched back from the screen. The other thing that even helps is to try to be eye to eye in your camera as much as possible. I'm seeing a lot of these recorded podcasts that everybody's putting up on LinkedIn these days and things. And there's so many of them I'm trying to demonstrate, like where they're looking down into the camera, and you don't want to be as executive lording over your people. Or the opposite is if I go lower than the screen, or try to tip it so that I'm below, right? That is somehow diminutive, or that doesn't look very executive, because now you're bigger, you would be bigger than I would be in the screen. So it's kind of silly to think of how important that really is, but it is. To make sure that you can kind of look your people eye to eye and not have these weird angles going on. You also don't want it to be something where people are just looking up your neck or up your nose or that kind of thing. This may happen for people that are using their phones for their Zoom calls, particularly if the, might be wiggling a lot or they're holding it out here. If they don't have a stand, encourage everybody to get stands for their phones, because that can also be where people are looking down a lot into the screen, and then that changes the angle into a weird angle. So the gesturing part that I was talking about is making sure that you can be seen. There's a lot of little things that go into this, such as making sure that there's contrast between the wall and you so that you can be seen. Again, if you have one of those huge executive chairs in your office that are really large, I would suggest that you don't match the chair. What will happen is you'll be kind of like a floating head in the screen, and they won't really be able to see your gestures so well. If I was sitting on a black big executive chair, you would sort of miss my arm. I mean, this is a blue shirt, but it's coming across really dark. Think about your lighting. All of those sorts of things are really important for these to keep that executive presence. Again, you're trying to retain looking like the boss. So silence we already covered. Observation, you're looking at them. You can see them on the screen. Posture, so this is that great, having really good posture sitting up. It will keep you more energized as well than when you keep the kind of slouchy posture sitting in the chair. That puts you even further away from the screen, and it doesn't have as much energy level as sitting up and being really present. Okay, I'm going to check. There is a question in here. Yes, you are going to be sent a recorded video. I would certainly encourage you to talk to your leaders. The question is, will FEI send a link to the recorded video? Are we permitted to talk with our leaders about some of these techniques, or is this material copywritten? It is. Obviously, this is kind of proprietary. I do have an online version of this that I would, of course, rather that you purchase to help my business, and then everybody can see it. And there's so much more than what we're going to get in this hour. It involves everything from setting up the call to ending the call. Everything. I recommend setting up a background picture in your Zoom window. If you have a really messy background, or where you're at is not conducive, then using the Zoom backgrounds is certainly okay. Or sometimes it's fun, to put on the Bahamas behind you or something, because we're trying to keep some levity in our meetings these days. The only thing that kind of gets a little bit weird is you'll see it's that cutout around your head, the green screen cutout. It's really how much that bothers you, whether you want to use those or not. There are also ones that you can purchase to put behind your screen as well. It is really kind of a personal preference. Some people like to feel very executive and they put themselves in a conference room because that makes them feel good. It's up to you. Can you please talk about color choices? Oh, video interviews. Let me, as I'm switching back, I will talk about that. For sure, colors, I would avoid white because, here we go, share screen again. White does not do so well, particularly for video, and they have a hard time keeping the colors. Sometimes you get washed out or there's too much reflection on your face, so I would avoid white. The best thing really for is actually contrast between your top and your bottom, actually, depending on the type of interview that you're doing. If it's something where you are going to be seen through the screen, because interviewing nowadays through the screen, obviously you want to keep all of these tips for your on-screen interviews, that you want them to be able to see you in the screen, you want to be exhibiting as much body language as possible, but that contrast is going to be really, really key. Blues look good. I personally like happier colors. Anything that does well for your skin tone, I would also look at. In fact, I'm going to be doing a webinar in a couple weeks, I think, with a stylist. And we're going to be talking about virtual, so that whole thing of what do you wear. So connect with me on LinkedIn, and you'll make sure that you have when that's happening too. And we'll be talking a lot more about color choice and things like that. So we're back to our posture. You is uniqueness, and one, of course, you is a difficult word, a letter to find words that go with. But one thing that happens when we start to talk about body language and people get really caught up in all these rules in their head, and they come to me sometimes and they say, can you fix me? Can you fix this? And I'm like, well, what is it exactly that you want to be fixed? People tell me I use my hands too much. Okay, let's unpack that a little bit. When have you had this reaction? Is it when you're presenting? Is it in normal meetings? Is it one-on-one? Who said this to you? Is it one person in your entire life that's made that comment, and maybe it isn't as big of an issue as you think it is? Or, it may be part of your heritage. It may just be part of you that you use your hands a lot, and we just need to look at moderating that so that you keep your uniqueness. So I don't want anybody to take away from today's webinar that you really need to change how you are. You just need to modify it for this new medium. So what makes you you is great. Keep some humor in it. Make sure that as the leader, you get on the call. I suggest that you open the call a couple minutes early so that as people join, you have the chance to welcome them and ask how they're doing. Just the same thing that you would do in a regular conference room meeting. As people gather, you ask questions, say, hey, how are you? How are things going? How are the kids? How are your parents doing? Whatever questions that way, try to keep that normalcy with asking that. We tend to get all serious on these virtual meetings because we have things to get done, and they become, again, that negative or that real serious thing. Put in some funny memes or set up a funny challenge. Encourage everybody to pick a funny background for this particular call today, or find ways to still keep things fun. If you generally do a coffee meeting where your door is just open, do that, but establish every Wednesday from 8 to 9, I'm just going to be sitting in Zoom and hop on and we'll have a conversation. If you normally have a cocktail hour with your team, do a virtual cocktail hour. Keep things as normal as possible and use this technology to your advantage. R is relationship. And this is the thing that people are craving right now, right? We all feel isolated. I am just like you. Normally, everything that I do is face-to-face because I do so much more face-to-face than I do virtually. And I've had to shift my business model as well to really serve my clients, saying, how do you need help in this virtual world? What can I do for you? Let's do a quick lunch and learn with your team, and let's talk about how to make these meetings more beneficial for you, and what is the decorum that we should be having, and how do you come across better on screen, all of that kind of stuff. And collaboration signals now are becoming really uber important, because when I told you to sit up, that doesn't mean you need to stiffen up. That's two different things. When you're sitting up, that is opening your body to reacting and to having nonverbal communication being shared. And breathing is really important, because the most collaborative signal that we can give is connecting our gestures, these things, to our postures, which would be posture shifts, okay? And when those things combine, that's showing compassion. It is increasing collaboration. And it's not as easy to see on the screen, but it is the one thing we can see. The other things that we don't really see pressure changes on the screen so much. It's difficult to see focus changes because our focus is always right at the screen. So some of the cues are fuzzy through the screen, but I call it moving like you dance. That's what it says here on the screen. So when you dance, if you need to even put on some music for your team during the during the call to kind of keep them relaxed and moving, that's great. But one thing that happens is, or if we're only seeing everybody from here up, we get really stiff, and then we're not getting the signals that we're used to, and that raises our anxiety level. So that raising the computer eye to eye, sitting back so that we can see more of you is really, really important. What time is it? Okay, 38. E is energy. This is really, the posture and the energy are the two greatest parts of this. These are the only two things you remember. These are the things I want you to remember from today. Really great posture, sit back from the screen, and up your energy. You are going from 3D, you as a person on your side of the screen, and then flattening out to 2D on the other side. And that makes it more difficult for your natural small movements to be seen. And if you tend to be more subdued, that's not my issue. I tend to not be subdued. But if that is your normal habit, you're going to need to remind yourself, which is why sitting up is so important. That kind of puts your brain in okay, I'm in leader mode right now on this call. And be aware also that your team may not be exhibiting the same kind of energy that you're used to seeing from them. And so we don't want to go down that negative road of, oh my gosh, they're really worried, they're not engaged. Like, check in with them and really ask them, because you can't necessarily take what you're seeing as total truth, because their energy level is going to be a little bit lower. Or share with them, look guys, we got to up our energy a little bit. And so I am a little bit on steroids here this morning, because it's not just the coffee, because I know that to get through to you on the screen, I need to be a little bit more energetic. And this is the same thing if you record videos for anything with your team or for trainings and things. You have to be a little bit more animated on video than you would necessarily be in real life, because the video is wonky with the energy going 3D to 2D. Okay. Oh, we were going to demo again. I've been pretty much, whoops. I don't want to show. Stop share. Okay. So normally, right, if I'm kind of sitting, and so I'm just here, which is what those pictures look like, right? I'm just here. And we're in another meeting, because I've had 4 meetings today, and now we're on another one. Keep your meetings shorter and take care of yourself by maybe not having so many, or not so many back to back, because you have to take care of yourself and know that this is taking up more of your energy than a normal meeting, because you have to be here and you're the one that's leading the charge and has to keep everybody sane and all of this kind of thing, right? So you are having more energy even while you're just sitting and listening. You need to keep a pleasant face going on, right? Because you got to watch the serious face that happens when you're not speaking. We tend to, everything comes down and we become really serious. And the other people on your team are, what's wrong with the boss? What are we doing wrong? Why is he angry? All of those things are going to be happening. So you have to keep up your energy even through the screen, because my normal might just be to talk like this. Like this would be fine, but it looks a lot flatter. And so I need to raise up my energy just a little bit and come at you with a little bit more energy. That hopefully is making sense to you. Looks like we have another. Use of slides with the combo. I think that's always fine. I think still presenting, if you would be presenting with a PowerPoint, still present with a PowerPoint. Zoom might be having security issues. I read something about that too, where they're not, it was from a lawyer, and the fine print in like how they're sharing our information is kind of up to question. So that would be something to check with your legal team on, particularly if you're recording things, what can be recorded and what can't. You need to record the chat as well because of things that might have been said there, because now we have the ability to record. So, and you probably need to tell everybody that we are recording this call. You need to, those kinds of things. I work for the university, and of course, everything we're doing now is online, and we are required to record every live thing that we do in order to be compliant with something. So I have to record it, and I have to tell everybody that they're being recorded before we start. So there's things to also be checking with legal on. There are many other choices, and now I think Microsoft Teams people are using. There's the good old standard of Skype. I know my husband's company uses Skype for most of their things. It really would be up to you, and that would be a good question to ask legal about, or we should be all doing a little Google search on that probably. Okay, I want to go back to sharing my screen again. And here we go. From current slide. Come on. There we go. So I want to go back to our little picture here now that we've talked about so many things. And I just have a question. I want you to just put in the chat box, take a look at their faces. I literally took this off of LinkedIn 2 days ago, I think. Somebody had posted, great meeting. And I was surprised. I had to take all their names off. I was kind of surprised somebody posted that on LinkedIn with the name still on there because they probably didn't necessarily have permission. And look at, so I've numbered them 1 through 11. Put in the chat box who you think is the leader. Who do you think is the executive on this call? Or is running the call? Maybe they're not necessarily, I'm not sure whether this was some kind of, networking meeting or whether this was a real thing. So start putting in the chat box. I'm just kind of curious as to what you may think or who you may think might be the leader here. A lot of votes for number 2. Oh, 4. Okay. Yeah, we're kind of all over the place. Looks like 2, 3, and 4 have the most votes. So let's look at those for a second. Times 8:45. Okay. Number 2 looks, I agree. I think he could look like the leader because he's got the better headset for one, and he's got some pretty good posture going on. If he is the leader, I would hope that he would go through and get one of those background screens, if this is what his office looks like, right? We want to minimize all of the clutter behind us. Number 1, I saw some people's had number 1. I like number 1. I think that's a good choice too. And that, again, that's one of the examples of having the camera not in the right position, number 1. You see how it's coming up at him? And so it's just kind of weird. It's like, he's looking down through some kind of fishbowl at us or something. His lighting is a little poor too. It's great that he's got natural light coming in from the side, but he should have something in front of him as well. Number 3, I like number 3 as well as a possibility. She at least looks like she's engaged. Maybe she was the one that was talking when this screenshot was taken. 6. That's interesting that 6 is a choice. Nobody's putting in number 5, right? She looks, right? Is she sitting in a closet? She should work again on her background with hers, and she just doesn't look engaged. She's very dour with her face. So pretty much all of these folks could be, could use a light check, right? A little bit better lighting. Could sit back so that we could see more of them. And this is a really good reminder that we all have to watch our faces when we're not speaking, because this is generally what our calls look like. And, person 8 here, we're worried about her. Like what's going on, with her dour face. We're not sure. And so we really have to be thinking. And it's not that you have to be guy smiley the whole time. I'm not talking you have to keep your face smiling the entire time. What I mean is that you just kind of have to keep good thoughts going through your head. You have to kind of mindset trick your brain into, oh, that's a really good comment. Glad they're bringing that up. Put a lot of little positive things going through your head so that you don't have this resting face. If it's a very serious conversation, obviously that's a different story. Or if you need to have a serious talk with your team because they're not meeting their numbers or other things are going on, yes, take this with a grain of salt. In general, if it's a check-in meeting, if it's your normal daily meeting and you want to keep everything pleasant, then keep your face in a pleasant, looking pleasant. Okay, so I have poor lighting, they're too close, they have messy backgrounds, and there's lots of resting bee face, okay, in these pictures. So that's just a reminder to us that this is what we usually look like in our meetings. And next one. A couple other tips, and I might have mentioned some of these as we went. The folks in their little lounge chairs, that's just a reminder to use all the bells and whistles that come with your software. If you have breakout rooms, go ahead and use those. If part of your large meeting would be people breaking off and talking in small groups and then coming back and giving suggestions or reports, still do that. You have the capability in most of the software or programs that are out there to do smaller meetings. I would suggest you to encourage your team, if they would normally pop in each other's offices, to set up their own meetings. Encourage them to be using the software as well and to come live versus always just on the phone. The little guy in the middle, I think I already mentioned, if you have cocktail hour, still have cocktail hour. If you have lunch and learn, still bring people in to do virtual lunch and learns for your team. Try to keep things as we said, as normal as possible. And the time thing is just going back to, I think I mentioned, to trying to keep meetings shorter or not having so many. Because of the fatigue of feeling like you're on and you're on screen the entire time can get a little bit draining. So maybe shorten your meetings or do a check-in in the beginning of the day and at the end, so you don't have just one long drawn out meeting. Maybe you need to reschedule kind of what your normal was, because we've lost the ability to just pop in as much as we used to, with knocking on the door and popping your head in and asking a clarifying question, which we don't get with our meetings now because we don't have that. Everybody's kind of leaving the meeting, so they ask questions and things. We've lost that time, or reminders to people of, hey, remember you were going to send me that contractor's phone number? Could you do that? I'd like to call them this afternoon. You end the meeting, you didn't get the number, they're going to forget, and then they have to bug you. And so as an executive, you're maybe getting more emails than you used to, or you're getting more little phone calls, those little interrupting phone calls that might be hurting your own productivity. So maybe scheduling meetings different times of the day is good. I'm going to go into the chat box here. And while we do that, I just wanted to let you know, I think I mentioned there is a course for this that it's that confident visionary leader.thinkifit.com. Email me and I'll make sure you get the link for this course. It is, I think it's 6 modules plus a bonus, and it really takes you through so many other tips and things that I haven't even told you. There's ways to be persuasive with your body language, even on these calls. And we didn't get into any of your persuasion, how you should be gesturing to take your team through the decision-making process is not, we don't have time for that. So there's a lot more in the course if you're interested in that. And I do have a book. It doesn't have the body language piece. It's really the foundational work behind the decision-making and the different types of people that you have on your team based on the psychological framework of decision-making that psychologists have. We've overlaid our theory onto it. And so it's an explanation of kind of how all of this came to be. So you're more than welcome to go on Amazon and get that as well. Let me check out the new questions. Now's a great time to put more questions in your box here. Oh, what do you mean by energy and how do you show it? All right, we will review that again. Oh, okay. This is a good question from Mike. What do you think about using a headset for audio, mic, earbuds, or as you're doing nothing, using the computer mic and speakers? Does one come off better or worse? I think whatever makes you sound best is fine. I did invest in a better microphone for this particular presentation, though the cord wasn't long enough to get our, and it's more of like the sit and talk kind of microphones. So I didn't use it. I didn't buy the stand as well, which I might need to depending on how long we're in this new paradigm. As long as you sound good, whatever you want to use is fine. Do be aware some of the Bluetooth headsets, depending on your computer and the service that you're using, I've noticed in some of the virtual calls that I've done, some of those Bluetooths actually don't work, like we can't hear you, or for some reason it's really garbly or staticky. So it's a test to see what is better. Using the headset, yeah, I always think a headset looks very call center-ish and not professional. Yeah, I mean, one thing that I saw somebody had posted, somebody I think from LinkedIn did a little like virtual thing, and she just had the little tiny earbuds in without the cord, and she sounded great. I was like, wow, do they sound that good? So I don't know what level of earbuds she was using, but those sounded good. And so then she was on without being, you couldn't really see it. You couldn't tell she was using those. Yeah, you do look a little, airport, what am I trying to say? You look a little in the cockpit kind of thing if you have the headset on. Oh, reminding me, yes, to read the questions. What do you mean by energy and how do you show it? Let's go back to that one. Energy is going to be your, how should I say it? The level of internal movement that's going on that you're going to be able to respond to, that people are responding to. So if I take my energy way down and I'm not putting much effort into my movements and I kind of become more lackadaisical in a sense, just down here, then people, they're not going to get much of a sense of whether I am happy about something, whether I'm disagreeing with something, or I'm upset about something. They're not going to get a really good read because everything is flat. In order to make that come through, I need to put a little bit more energy and effort into it. It's sort of an excitement level. You need to just be a little bit more invested and excited and interested in the call. It's a nonverbal reading of the of kind of that empathetic energy that's going on. And because we're going through the screen, we need to up that a little bit. Make sure, put another question in the chat box if that didn't help to answer it. It's kind of like taking the dial. Hopefully most of you are old enough to know the difference between the 33 record and the 45. You just need to up just enough that everything is coming through the screen versus just being flat. I call it looking kind of flat on the screen. We had Jerry commenting about the difference between Zoom and some of the other services. He says that he believes that the free version is less secure than if you pay a fee. And that is something then to look into as well. I pay for the Zoom personally with my business because I want to make sure that I have more than 40 minutes. I think the free version has less time, and I want to make sure that I can have more people on the call. I believe the free version has some limits on that as well. But look into all of the fine print on all of your software stuff. A little echo from your room probably is. Thoughts about headphones versus speakers, mic from webcam. This is going to be a little bit of a personal preference as well. If your company will provide that, or you want to make sure the new microphone that I bought is around $200, it's really up to you as to what you want to go into as far as extra things. Usually, even if you just plug in your earbuds into your computer, it will take out some of that boominess or the extra noise from that. So it really is up to you. And sometimes it's testing. It depends on your computer and then how it sounds to everybody else. So it's really great to get some of your team members together and do a test. You know, okay, what if I plug in here? Can you still hear me? Does that sound better or worse? What if I unplug it? This is I grabbed my kid's video game player headset. How's this sound? Do you hear me? Do you hear me better that way? It's a lot of trial and error to see what is going to be better. Or I'm just not really an expert in the physical things, and how they plug in. So you could do an easy Google or look through YouTube, because I'm sure there's a ton of video right now with people talking about how to set things up for the best sound. And then you'd have the best sound and the best body language, so you'd really be a double whammy, which would be great. That looks like I got them all, perhaps. Let me go back up to the top and make sure. And it is right at 9 o'clock, so it looks like we did a good job there. That was everybody in the chat there. So here's one way also to remind you to send me a note, and I will send you the ebook and some handouts. One of the things is like a long card that you can print and give out to your team with some of these tips on it, like an infographic that you can share as well. Thank you so much for your attention, everybody, and we're going to turn it back over to Susan.
Alison, thank you so much. That was a great presentation. I've tried to move myself back a little bit and fix my posture, so thank you for great tips. There was one other question in the chat that I just wanted to bring up really quick. It's from Karen. We've all been watching the White House coronavirus news conferences, and Karen asks, what do you think of Dr. Fauci's posture? He's always got his arms folded when he's standing up there, and she just kind of wanted your opinion on that real quick.
Well, first of all, and I had posted on LinkedIn, I think that they need to be doing better social distancing with the message they're giving is a mixed message to the world, because they're telling us all to social distance, and yet they still have 3 or 4 people in the view. It would be a very strong statement if they all stood really far apart and they wiped down that microphone and that podium in between every speaker. That might get the message across of how serious this is. The cross, trying to think of, now remind me, so Fauci, is that the woman that always wears the stars, or is that the dude?
That's Fauci is the gentleman. There's Dr. Birx, she is the woman, and then Dr. Fauci is the one everybody loves. The one everybody loves, wants to ask the questions too.
That's right. Okay. I just wanted to make sure. He is vertically challenged a little bit with the podium, for one. And I think that is a lot of the cause of him because he's, not seen as much. He would do better to get away from the podium, honestly, so that we could see his nonverbals. And yes, I think that if he would open up a little bit, it would be better for him to do that. It might be a bit of him thinking this is serious topic, so I'm going to have a serious pose up here on the podium. There's a lot, who knows, it may even be somebody told him to stand like that. The image people and things that the White House has may have told, may have given him information that I wouldn't necessarily agree with. It is better than some of the different politicians that I've seen that tend to get, that are pushing away a lot of the information, it seems to be, or are pushing away the public with this kind of hand motion. So this maybe he tends to use his hands too much. He's been told he uses his hands too much, so he's clamping down. It's really hard to tell why he would be moving that way. Yeah, it might be a good, I don't know, does anybody linked into him? Send him a message.
I'm kind of thinking Dr. Fauci is not real comfortable up there, but we're all glad he is. So, Alison, thank you so much. It's a great presentation. Alison's email is up on the screen now if you want to get in touch with her. We have recorded this session, so we will send it out. We are going to start doing a weekly kind of update newsletter that'll have information about our upcoming webinars. We're scheduling those fast and furious. We'll also have a link to this presentation. And we did a March 26th panel discussion that Maggie Martinson, she moderated. So that will also include the link to that. We'll get that information out to you all early next week. Please take care of yourself, everyone. We'll have another CMG breakfast planned for May. We're working on that now. We're working on that with the committee. But Alison, great presentation. Thank you so much.